Bitcoin crashing down to levels that we haven't seen since February of this year. And the question of the day is, how much worse can it get? Perhaps there might be a little bit of a bounce around the corner as well, which is what we'll discuss on this video, as well as worst case scenario. More or less just kind of a revisiting of the Saturday video that we put out, which was documenting, well, what is the worst case scenario as of right now. And now I want to kind of expand upon that as Bitcoin does, of course, well, play out the downside move that was postulated in that video. So let's get into it, starting off with the most important chart for discovering, where Bitcoin is likely to find its current move. This is once again the 5-day BBWP versus momentum chart right here. And as you can see, Bitcoin is obviously taking a massive leg down upon volatility expansion. So what's actually very interesting to me is that, well, the market is just the 5-day setup after the 5-day setup after the 5-day setup in terms of the overall long-term direction. And in this case, it has gotten it right yet again. We do see that the 5-day stochastic oscillator has been positioned to the downside basically since mid-June, which did say, hey, caution in this case. Best case scenario for the Bitcoin blue laws would of course be sideways. And in the interim, if there is going to be breakdown, it very likely happens very, very soon. And that's kind of what we're seeing, or that's very obviously what we're seeing as of right now. So I've gone ahead and back tested all of these prior signals where we have seen 5-day BBWP at extreme lows and then expand off those extreme lows, whilst the 5-day stochastic oscillator was positioned to the downside, which, by the way, will continue to the downside as long as Bitcoin's closing this next period below 66,100. And if we go over the full history of Bitcoin, there have been 10 of these prior iterations. Out of those 10, 8 have worked out. Obviously, this one's going to very likely work out as well, seeing as Bitcoin's already, several $1,000s, or actually $10,000 below the actual pivot point. But what we're most interested in now is the average returns for this particular setup, which is 38.5%. When we do incorporate a first standard deviation analysis into this, we do come up with a highly probable range for the returns of this setup, in this case, negative returns, I should say, of about 25.75% on the lower end, and on the upper end, about 45.5%. So, worst case scenario, 45.5% to the downside, and probably best case scenario, about 25.5% to the downside. Now, measuring off of our current high, we do see that Bitcoin's actually already played out that 25% move to the downside. So, if you're looking at this, well, that would suggest that, hey, if you are the most, I guess, optimistic, then perhaps this would be the low of the move. I would say that that's very unlikely here, because while we are seeing volatility expand, keep in mind that we're probably not going to see the totality of this move until volatility really expands at least above 50 percentile and probably closer to 70 or 80% percentile right here. The reason why I say it's likely to get a little bit higher is because this particular volatility contraction phase was for a very, 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 very long time, which does imply that the resolution of that is going to be of greater stature, essentially. So going back into it right here and playing out what we would potentially be seeing towards the average of this move, which would be about like mid 30s, that would put Bitcoin somewhere between like $45,000 to $47,000, which I do think is of interest here. Of course, worst case scenario, which I do not think is happening, but as always, it doesn't really matter what I think. Price action does what price action is going to do. So in this case, what would be like what would be in alignment with the worst case scenario from this particular setup based off of history? Well, that would be about a 45% move, which would put Bitcoin actually below $40,000. That's 39. So I am leaning towards likely closer to the average of those presumed moves. Again, around mid 40s, something like that. And of course, when we do look at this, we can also come up with the average amount of days that it takes for this to find the next major low based off of this setup, which on average takes just over 36 days. So putting that into perspective from Bitcoin's last rejective high, we are currently on day number, well, we're actually not on day number 30, but we're on period number 30. So at the end of this next 5-day time frame, that will be day number 30, which won't happen for another 3.5 days. around 35 days. That would obviously put us out until middle of this month, basically. And again, that is an average. There's going to be some variance, some a little bit more, some a little bit less. But, again, it's unlikely that this move is done. There might be bounces. Of course, there can be bounces. In fact, there likely is a bounce in the short term here. But one, the average amount of days, and then two, volatility, this is not where we expect the end of a move off of volatility expansion. We expected at least minimum 50 percentile, and personally, probably more than that. I mean, again, this was a pretty crazy one right here. I mean, within the context of Bitcoin's history. So, overall, the move to the downside unlikely over. However, as you can see on this chart, Bitcoin is just resting right upon this green moving average. That's the 55 exponential on the 5-day time frame. So, getting a little bit of a relief rally here, probably not out of the question. When we take that one step further, we can see that Bitcoin on the HPDR on the 5-day time frame is bouncing off at the 78.6 level right here. Again, that's not like it's not like a long-term sign of strength or anything like that, but very likely to at least catch a small bid and a small bounce off of that. Maybe a bounce could come back up closer to 56. I don't really have strong opinions on that. But ultimately, as long as Bitcoin is especially below the April lows now, or I guess it's May lows, have to be looking at that as very likely any sort of test around that region is very likely rejection with continuation to the downside overall. Now, I want to bring you over here to the monthly time frame for the HPDR, and I do think that it's rather interesting that while Bitcoin is very likely to lose the median here, we're very likely to see a reset with the test back down to the bottom end of the HPDR bands, which is the 38.2 level right here, which is at a price point of about $45,500, which is eerily similar or very, very close to the average move that we expect off of this setup right here. Again, around $46,000. So we're seeing multiple things in Confluence now. And I would be looking at that as a really, 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 really good level if Bitcoin were to get down there in the next week or two. For at least a very significant bounce, probably maybe even the low. On top of that, if we draw a fib from the current high of this cycle to the current low of this cycle, we can see the 50% level is actually right around $45,000 as well. So many, many different things coming around this region, which are completely unrelated to each other, but all kind of suggestive of the same thing. Now, again, in the short term, Bitcoin can bounce here. I'm not super focused on that. Maybe do a little bit of a short-term video, I don't know, over the weekend or something. But for now, long term, it looks like Bitcoin's gonna be spending a lot of time. Probably going to be spending a lot of time, coming back down closer to the middle of this range. I mean, just is what it is. Anyways, let's see. I'm just making sure that I hit all my notes. Oh, yes. And one last thing. Okay, this is something that I believe I've brought up about 2 weeks ago now. I have not referenced it since because, realistically, it's not that big of a deal or not that important to me, but we did see that there is a head and shoulders, a herp and derp here on the weekly RSI with your left herp, your double head derp, and then your right Quasimodo derp over here. And yes, I have seen these play in the past, can be a decent indication, I suppose. We do see that the measured implied move from that would be, somewhere down around here at a weekly RSI read of about 40. And getting pretty close to there right now, actually. Probably even hit that level next week or at minimum the week after that. So again, this move, is probably unlikely done to the downside. And I think that it's likely to accelerate to new lows relatively soon rather than later in this case. Over these next couple of weeks, we probably do see the next major low for this current breakdown before a real attempt at a bounce and maybe the next major low. Definitely possible, but of course remains to be seen. And for now, direction is still obviously to the downside. We can go ahead and reference our Friday statistics over here. Friday a little bit more likely to close negatively than positively at 57.5% of all Fridays closing negatively since 2024 began. As far as average returns goes, we're not going to probably be seeing that today, I suspect. Again, when we do see moves that are certainly much further away from the average returns, that's a signal of a real a real breakout or breakdown. In this case, obviously a breakdown. We can even see that the current move is significantly below the 68th percentile of what we would expect for the average loss. Yeah, on a Friday, which right now from open to current price is about a 5.5% move almost. So, do be aware of that. Also, I wanted to bring up this as well. I don't talk about this too much on these videos just because, it's more related to short term, but I do want to make sure that the people who have access to this indicator, the historical price action statistics indicator, that that over here, you can actually get an hourly analysis of whatever day that you desire. If you just take this on into the settings, and you will see that you'll actually get every stat for price action broken down by hour here. And this can be very, 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 very useful because you can start to see which hour is most likely to close positive or negatively. In fact, funnily enough, now that I bring this one up, this particular hour that we're at right now, since 2024 began, 88.5% of the time has closed negatively from open to close. That's pretty fucking high, man, for an average loss of about, what is this? Spot 30%. So yeah, this is, I guess if I would have actually known, I'm going to try to put a bot on this. Actually, that seems quite obvious. Yeah, that's my next job. Yes, so you can do that. Just want to make sure that people who have access to this actually know that. But ultimately, Bitcoin, again, just kind of going over this, very likely lower to go. Maybe there's a short-term bounce where we currently are, based off of several of the things that we spoke about today. How high can bounces get without really doing anything of significant interest? Well, basically today's open. And I don't think it's going to retest there actually as well. When we go down to the hourly here, you can see that's daily HPDR bands. It's getting to levels that we just do not see that often, but obviously you do expect those levels to be hit on a big breakdown like this. So it is telling you that this is like a rather important move. But even then, I think I'd have to go down to like a very short-term time frame to get anything resembling a reasonable potential bounce target if Bitcoin does try to bounce here. Like I said, I think 56,000 maximum, probably more like mid 55s. I have to really go out here on the 4-hour time frame. Currently Bitcoin is actually at the 95% level, which is like very, 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 very far outlier. So again, getting like a very short-term bounce here, very much possible, maybe back above 55, but probably not past 56, or at least not much past 56. So my main message today would be, don't get caught up in what probably amounts to a weekend bounce before further continuation to the downside, assuming that, all higher term timeframes close basically below $56,000 today. We do have the weekly closure coming in for CME a little bit later. And as it stands right now, that's a clear and obvious continuation of a breakdown coming into next week. So that's going to do it for today. Nice positive message. I'll leave you with one last thing, the BBC Newsnight playout. And here we go. The collective screams of all of the altcoin holders and Bitcoin holders at this point as well, going out into the ether, never to be heard again. I bought, but it's going lower. What should I do? Oh, what a great resolution to this issue you might be having here. It's not stopping going lower. What do I do? Just keep on holding, bro. Your patience will be rewarded by losing more money, most likely. Sorry, I can't help myself. Okay, just having a little bit of fun on a Friday after a pretty nasty week in terms of price action. So it is what it is, my friends. And we'll end things on that note. With that said, take care. Much love. And if you find this content valuable, please do consider subscribing. All right, catch you next time.